pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call roll.
Mrs. Dobas,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Ms. Roll, Mr. McGregor,
Here.
Mr. Modrak,
Here.
Mr. Nagel,
Here.
Mrs. Turner,
Here.
Mr. Spicuzza,
Present.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
8 here, 1 absent.
At this time, we're going to have a presentation from the municipality about Peter Page Park project. Mr. Christensen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, school board directors, Dr. Walsh, school district staff, residents. My name is Lawrence Christian, and I work for the municipality of Bethel Park. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and address the board this evening concerning this project. If you'll indulge me a little bit, I'd like to take you back to June 20th, 2018. The night Bethel Park experienced a devastating flood event. Bethel Park and the surrounding communities received over 5 rains in a 2-hour time frame. There were over 450 calls for flooding from residential homes and businesses. There were numerous homes and businesses that underwent varying degrees of flooding, and many that needed remediation, rebuilding, and some of them even condemning. This single event required the municipality of Bethel Park to spend over $900,000 on repairing the municipal infrastructure alone. Almost immediately, the staff began looking for locations where stormwater projects could be completed, with the critical requirement that be on the property. The municipality completed phase 1 of these projects, which included improvements and enlarging the 2 existing ponds in the industrial park, increasing the flow capacity by over 1 million gallons. New underground tanks and ponds were added to Birch Tree Park and Oak Tree Park, effectively containing several 100,000 more gallons of water. The goal of these projects is to hold back water at various locations throughout the municipality. The more water can be held upstream during a rain event helps the downstream residents. And when that rain subsides, provides critical time for our downstream residents to recover. That upstream water can then be slowly released after the rain event has passed. On May 28, 2019, the staff presented a plan to school board for Peter Page Park. This included the retention pond to be located behind the football field along the stream. The area downstream of this park received significant flooding destruction. By using the same logic for phase 1 projects, we want to hold back water if possible. At that May meeting, you, the members of the board that were present, approved the project. However, we have redesigned the project and made some significant improvements to the original concept. Today we have Mark Skocek with Gateway Engineers to help explain the new proposal. After we review the plan, the municipality is requesting either an easement for the part of the pond that extends past Peter Page Park onto school district property or the school district.
This might be better.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Or the school district can transfer the small piece of land to the municipality. With your indulgence, I'll now turn it over to Mark Skocek to review the redesigned project.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I believe the previous design that you may have seen, we were trying to do smaller ponds to try to control the water that comes through this area. And we found that it's going to be better if we take the smaller storms and just allow them to flow through as they do historically, but build an embankment so that the water for the bigger storms can pond up behind this, and we let less of a peak rate go downstream, and we'll hold back that water and let it slowly over time release downstream, thus, less adversely impacting the people. There are approximately 300 acres of drainage area tributary to this stream that comes through here. We have this redesigned embankment is going to be about 14 feet high above the baseball field. we're going to install a culvert underneath of that that's going to follow the general alignment of the existing stream so that kind of your everyday storms, you know, 1-year storm, 2-year storm, 10-year storm, will continue to flow through as it historically has, and it'll continue on downstream as it did. But when we get these big storm events, this pipe will actually act as a choke, and the water will start to pond up behind the embankment, and that 36-inch pipe or box culvert, whatever the final design ends up being, will slowly release that water downstream. In addition to providing flood control, we are also going to do like a wetlands mitigation through here, and we're going to restore that stream as well because it is pretty heavily eroded over time. With this embankment and design, you know, we're approximating for the 50-year and 100-year storm events, which are the big events, we can get about a 40 to 50% reduction in the peak rate downstream. The ponding area, when it's full, is going to hold about 750,000 cubic feet of water, which is about 5.6 million gallons. And anything over and above those storm events will go through a stabilized spillway over on this side. It'll avoid the baseball field. It'll flow through this spillway and continue on down the stream as it normally would. The next one, if we want to take these clips off.
So before you flip it over, will you turn it around so that the audience can see it? And the camera is actually in the back of the room. So if you would point out where that structure is again, please.
This will be the embankment. This is the existing baseball field. This is the existing football field. The stream flows in this direction. We're going to install a culvert through that stream and build about a 14 to 18 foot embankment over top of it. And there will be an emergency spillway over here, which will direct any flows over and above the 100-year through that spillway and on downstream, and it'll stay away from the ball fields.
Could you show us one thing on here also? You mentioned the wall you're going to build. Does that, it obviously must run perpendicular to the stream, but on the side of the softball field, does it also run parallel to the stream as well at that 14 to 18 foot?
It
Can you
does.
just show the outline of where that goes?
This is the existing grade at the ball field. I think there might be like a scoreboard or something back there. I'm not sure. And then right behind that, the embankment will start going up 14 feet high, and there's 10-foot wide berm at the top,
Okay.
and then we'll just go back down into the existing.
How are we going to get the emergency vehicles back there? Because that's part of the way that the emergency vehicles get back there now on that upper softball field. And you cannot come in from the lower parking lot through IMS. They can't get through.
This is down by.
Do they come down
Oh,
this
this
way?
is Perky, okay.
This is Peter Page.
When you said ball field and he started saying embankment, I was a little
Perky.
confused. Okay.
Before the water overtops the spillway, the area in red would be the area on the school property that is filled with water at that point. And again, this is only in one of the worst case scenarios. At regular storm event, the water will just be flowing through this culvert as it normally does. As you can see, there are about 8 to 10 feet of contours of elevation difference between the maximum water surface and that paved driveway up to the top of the hill.
Who's responsible for maintenance, like taking trees out of the culvert and stuff like that? Is that the city or the school?
For the property, that's where we're asking the
What-
easement and for property ownership.
Okay,
Those are the things that we would have to be responsible for
okay.
to maintain, because this is just like a normal retention pond, similar to the one in Logan and Industrial Park.
Okay.
Several years ago, when you mentioned what was occurring, is that the school district wanted to give the property to the municipality for them to do that. So we wouldn't own that property anymore, they would. Obviously, we could keep it and they could still do the work on it, but we thought it would make more sense to
Yeah.
deed it to them, is that what it would be? And could you turn around, could you show that to the people behind you, please?
Again, this is the area that would flood at the very top of this spillway. And that shouldn't happen even in a 100-year event, but obviously, you know, you gotta have precautions for anything even above that nowadays, so. But that would be the area that it would pond at the highest. And again, this is the top of the hill. There's about 10 feet between the top of that drive to where the water surface would be.
So how long would that water be expected to pond?
Well, we're gonna put about a 36-inch pipe down there.
Okay.
It might be a box, it could be circular. It would take less than 24 hours to dewater that.
Okay. And are there going to be precautions protecting that area? Because I know kids play back there and things of that nature. Gets done raining, they want to go play in the mud. I don't want to see them.
I think that certainly could be part of the design process, yes.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Nagel, you're on the same thing. I just asked make sure I was understanding all this correctly. There used to be, years ago, part of a trail that the cross-country team would train on. So again, I'd really appreciate it if that's all marked. I don't think we use it anymore, but at one point in time, it could be for them to train.
It's used by a lot of different people. I go running back there a lot. So you got cross-country people out there, you got runners like me, you got four-wheelers out there, motocross. So there's a lot of use back there. So we'll have to address each one of those independently.
That's it.
So you want to talk about the process, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I can address the process. So the two options that were outlined were to have an easement created to benefit the municipality, to allow them to do the work that is proposed, but the district, if there is an easement granted, the district would retain ownership rights to the property. The second option was that the school district would transfer a small piece of the land that is district-owned to the municipality. And so the school code at Article 7 authorizes school districts to do that. There has to be a 2/3 approval, so at least 6 board members have to vote yes to accomplish that. There are a couple steps that would have to occur preceding the deed of the property. We would, I have a question about whether there's a survey available. You'd have to identify the specific land that needs to be deeded over to the municipality and probably subdivide what you currently own. And there are costs associated with subdivision of the property that the board will want to consider before making that decision, and, decisions about who will own the cost of subdivision. The property can be deeded at a cost, or at, the cost is determined, between the two parties. So those are the general guardrails that you want to keep in mind. But it certainly can be done either way at the board's will.
And what is your timeline for your approval for you have to go through, I'm sure, environmental approvals and so forth.
Significant DEP permissions and permits on this one. This goes all the way up, correct me if I'm wrong, to a dam permit.
So it's going to take some time. So if we just have our solicitor meet with you guys and work out.
Your solicitor?
We can get
work with your details and so forth?
So that's the overall concept of what we're proposing.
Okay. And then when we know more about the costs, whether or not we should just keep it as an easement or deed it over to them. But I know that the original thought was to deed it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions of these gentlemen? Thank you for your presentation. And is it possible to email a picture of that to us, that diagram, so we can, it's hard to really look at it from a distance? That would be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I would like a motion to adopt the agenda for business items tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Turner and seconded by Mr. Nagel.
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Thank you. Dr. Walsh, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mrs. Dobus. Good evening, everyone. This seems very loud to me all of a sudden. The first thing I want to do is to acknowledge that their motion on tonight's agenda for one of our employees, a 16-year veteran bus aide who came to us in 2005, is up for retirement. And I wanted to acknowledge and thank her for her service to the district as you accept her resignation for retirement tonight. The second is to welcome Mr. Cromie to the microphone. We've decided to add to our monthly meetings an update from Mr. Cromie on happenings throughout the district, highlights, changes, new information, etc. So this will be our inaugural performance of the Mr. Cromie show. We're all yours, sir.
All right, it's a performance now. Just wanted to get us started on, earlier in July, we had our 6th annual Camp Invention, which is a nationwide STEM program. This year's camp welcomed a district record 169 students, including 40 sets of siblings. Can you hear me now? Oh, I apologize. Okay. This year's Camp Invention it had 169 students, which is the most ever for Bethel Park, including 40 sets of siblings from Bethel Park and neighboring school districts. So that's really a thriving program, and we're pretty excited about it. Also wanted to remind people about the Senior Citizen Pass. It grants you free admission, general admission seating to nearly all Bethel Park events. For municipality residents age 62 and older, you can pick up yours at the District Administration Building during normal business hours. Also want to touch on the upcoming Powder Puff football game. It's a Bethel Park tradition. I actually think this is really interesting. It goes back to at least 1972, which means that it predates Title IX legislation, which is really significant because women's sports in the last 50 years have changed very dramatically. And Bethel Park was doing a Powder Puff football game even before that, which is, I think, amazing. This year's game will be on Sunday, September 5th at 6 p.m. at Blackhawk Stadium. Everyone's welcome. We also want to congratulate Joe Serafini, who is a Bethel Park alum. He recently performed in the CLO's 75th anniversary, a Broadway musical celebration. Serafini was also recently cast in the Disney Plus series, bear with me, High School Musical, the series. And we're very excited for that. In June, Katie Mucci was recognized by the Pirates as an all-star teacher in an on-field ceremony held before their game against the Dodgers. And I also wanted to go through 2 Bethel Park baseball players, speaking of baseball, were drafted in July. They include Mason Miller, who was taken in the 3rd round by the Oakland Athletics, and Justin Mice, who went 97th. Justin, went in the 10th round. He went 283rd overall. Miller pitched at Waynesburg, and Mice pitched at Eastern Michigan. That's remarkable to have 2 players in the same draft. Also, while we're speaking of athletics, Bethel Park lacrosse goalkeeper Owen Peters recently announced his commitment to play at Mount St. Mary's, which is the Division I program in the Northeast Conference, which is the same as what Robert Morris used to be in. And also, Blackhawks quarterback Max Blank recently committed to FCS powerhouse Youngstown State, so congratulations to him. And finally, we had a campus beautification project over the weekend. Girl Scout Troop 52661 planted a pink dogwood tree at Benjamin Franklin Elementary School. And does anyone know how to tell if you have a dogwood tree? By its bark. Okay. I'll see myself out. Thank you.
He's here all night. Thank you, Mr. Cromie, and we'll also be pleased to see the return of the newsletter being communicated out.
Yep, in September. And we'll have that, and it'll be a lot of the information you see on here, or if you follow our social media accounts, there'll be a lot of that information, but that's really for people who don't follow social media accounts. So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing is to confirm, and maybe a quick discussion with the board, there was a suggestion or request from the community to allow the high school stadium to be open on weekends. It's not currently open and available for walkers and runners to use the track unless there was some event scheduled in the high school. And had a conversation with Mr. Fierst earlier tonight about that, and he was comfortable with that if the board was too, unless there's some history with that locking the gates that I'm not aware of. No history. Okay.
No, I don't know. Did we close it because of COVID or something? Or, because it used to be open more?
It might have been a carryover from COVID. We did restrict access during when we were in the full swing of the pandemic. And to my knowledge, the access really hasn't been reinstated to where it was.
Thank you for looking into that, because I know when we originally updated the stadium, it was to be a community place for walking, especially around the track and so forth. So it will be open on weekends and in the evenings then?
Yes, the only caveat is the lower level restrooms probably will not be open.
And Mr. Fierce, if possible, could we put a sign up for that? And if it, that it is open to the public? Only because I just sat down at softball registration for varsity and JV for the last hour and a half, and I was the directions person.
Yes, we will
Where's
put
the
a
field? Where's IMS? Where's this? Where's that? So could we please put a sign up, at least at the stadium, that says it's open and
yes.
these are the hours? I mean, I understand we have to lock it at some point, but these are the hours.
Yes.
So that was all I had, Mrs. Dobus, but I'd like to jump back into the agenda when we get to the personnel matters so I can introduce some folks to the board.
Okay, sounds good. At this time, we have public comments on agenda items, and we have invited Dr. Timothy Campbell to come and speak to us at this time as the first speaker for public comments, and you can use more than the 2 minutes if you need to. He's an esteemed community member. He used to be on the school board when I first was on the school board, and now he is on the town council. So as the doctor who really facilitated a lot of the vaccination that went through Spartan Pharmacy, we thought that it would be good to hear a medical professional talk to us.
President Dobos, thank you. Dr. Walsh, esteemed school board directors. Vince, I used to sit in your seat. I was there for a good 4 years. That was 6 to 10 years ago.
I took your spot.
How'd you end up on that side of the
I
table?
was over there, yeah. I replaced you, yeah.
But folks, tonight I was invited to speak specifically as an informational, to provide some data to help you in your deliberations as far as what to do, how to move forward with PPE, how to move forward with some suggestions for how to handle the upcoming school year. And you're wondering, who's this guy in front of you? I'm an internal medicine doctor by training. I also double boarded in palliative and hospice medicine. But I also serve on a federal DMAT team. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. DMAT's Disaster Medical Assistance Team. So if there's a hurricane or an earthquake or, God forbid, COVID, they could pluck a number of us from Pennsylvania. We have a team of about 36 people. They could send us anywhere in the nation. We could set up a hospital in about 2.5 hours. We could treat 250 people a day. It's amazing to see. It's amazing to see. So I was actually first involved with COVID. I just want to give you a little bit of background, let you know that I've got a few ninja skills along these lines. I was involved in COVID from the very beginning. My team was dispatched and deployed to Travis Air Force Base in January and February of 2020. So the folks who are coming out of Wuhan City in China, the folks who are coming off the Diamond Princess, we were the first people to go ahead and treat them in the United States, the first COVID patients. And those are U.S. citizens who were being repatriated to the United States, and we had to set up the quarantine standards, the protocols for handling them. And it was pretty much flying by the seat of our pants at that time, rediscovering the wheel. I had CDC on my left-hand side, I had United States Public Health on my right side, and I was the chief medical officer for that event, for the incident management team. After that, I'd had multiple other deployments through the course of the year. Some of them were air medical evacuation, moving COVID patients in airplanes to take them to other ICUs throughout the country. We also worked in border hospitals that were overrun with COVID. So a lot of these hospitals that had like maybe 20-bed ICUs, they would end up having 90 people on ventilators. So my team was tasked with converting floor beds into units.
Hey, Dr. Campbell, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but could you hold your mic a little bit closer? Just because we're televising this over YouTube, I think, just want to make sure.
Barry, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm kind of soft-spoken anyway. I just want to kind of break out in song.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no worries.
I think the people
You bet.
watching on YouTube may have a hard time.
Thank you. At home, I volunteer to work with administrative sides of hospitals, administrative staff, nursing homes, long-term care facilities. We took the lessons that we learned in the field and brought them home back here to Pittsburgh to get what can we do to mitigate a lot of the nursing homes, for instance, that were overrun with COVID and putting it into play. My most recent work has really been tasked with educating and training first responders, healthcare personnel. We established monoclonal antibody clinics to treat people who are acutely affected. In doing so, we found we could reduce admissions 65% across the board of people who were high risk for getting sick and being hospitalized. We set up mass immunization clinics and vaccination clinics throughout the country as well. So as such, I think I've got a little bit, a few ninja skills under my belt with dealing with this. We did a lot of work here getting the vaccination clinics in Bethel Park and doing some education here, even with some of our legislative staff as well. I appreciate wholeheartedly the tough decisions that you're going to have to make. There are strident voices and there are very strong opinions all over the map on this. I understand that. And it's for good reason, because who's our most valuable resource? Our children. You know, we want the best for them. They're our most vulnerable. They're our most precious. They're our future. So we want to do the best we can for them. So I get it. You know, having sat in that chair for what Barry took before he moved over there. So please understand, when framing my comments, I'm going to, I cannot separate vaccination from masking or social distancing. From a public health perspective, both are intimately, very, very closely related. And I genuinely believe the rollout in the vaccines, hands down, and the immunization efforts that we've done over these last 9 months have tremendously tempered the amount of human suffering that has transpired that we would have otherwise seen with COVID. I believe it really, truly saved many, many lives. We're getting close here in Pennsylvania to obtaining those levels of folks who are immunized or who have been infected previously that truly have that term herd immunity. As of this morning, I checked the data on the national sites, on Pennsylvania site. 65.7% of all eligible Pennsylvanians have had at least one vaccination. 56% have had 2 vaccinations or fully vaccinated. That's essentially 2/3 of our state population. And most epidemiologists, the doctors who study the statistics, the docs who really kind of love public health, they suggest that with a respiratory pathogen like COVID, which is droplet transmitted, okay, that only goes about 3 feet. That's why we doubled it. When we were in Travis, we just said, let's do 6 feet, let's double it, because we saw all these people popping positive. That's where the 6 feet came from. We know that in droplet transmitted drugs like illnesses like that you need about 70 to 75% of the population to be either infected and have developed a proper immune response, or have been vaccinated and developed a proper immune response before we start seeing the effects of herd immunity. So we start seeing the numbers drop precipitously. This past week, there's published information data, the newest, latest great stuff, Pfizer, the Moderna vaccines. 2 injections now are known to provide 94% protection. I think there was 94.6% was the data I saw. Does that mean it's foolproof? No, absolutely not. 6% of people who are fully vaccinated will still get still get COVID. But hopefully, where our thoughts are and what we've observed are the folks who do get it, that 6%, they generally won't die from it. They generally won't get as sick as they would have. But these are the folks who are often be the frail elderly. We know that as you age, your immune system drops, and it may drop tremendously across the board, that you may not be able to fight the infection. If you have other comorbid conditions, diabetes especially, I see a lot of underlying pulmonary disease, cardiac disease, vascular disease, you have much, much higher risk of having a bad outcome or getting sick or dying from COVID. I remain optimistic. We're close. We're very close. Genuinely, I feel if we had enough people vaccinated, I wouldn't have to stand here tonight. You wouldn't have to hear me blather on about COVID, which is something you've heard more than you've ever cared to hear about in your life. Many people don't know that 20% of every single cold that you get every year is a coronavirus. 20% of the colds. We've been exposed to this for millennia, centuries. We've had antibodies. We've been fighting this as humankind. I remember studying it 35 years ago in medical school, looking at the electron microscopy and looking at that halo, how it got the name coronavirus. What does corona mean in Spanish? Crown. Ah, that's how that came from. I'm full of useless information.
No, don't say that.
I'm not going there, Pam.
Useful information.
I'm not going for it. But this particular virus we see right now, COVID-19, it's not your mother's coronavirus. It's not the run-of-the-mill coronavirus at all. This one is particularly nasty. Do you ever hear of like SARS, Southeast Asia Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, MERS, SARS and MERS? They were coronaviruses, but they had point mutations that made them so infectious that we were really worried about them, really worried about it. So the coronavirus we see now, it's much easier to spread. It's much more infectious. It's more likely to get you sick if you get it. And if you're frail and elderly, it's more likely to kill you or make you very serious or give you serious long-term complications. And yes, the Delta variant that we're seeing now, we're seeing much higher transmission rates with it. If you take a virus and put it in a big enough population, that virus gets smart after a while. It evolves. It becomes much more effective. The purpose of a virus is to reproduce itself. We're just an intermediary host as far as it's concerned. So it becomes much more effective. How many variants do you think are out there right now? What's your rough guess?
5?
Thousands. I know, I thought so too. Alpha, beta, delta, gamma, lambda. Go through the Greek alphabet. There are thousands of variants of COVID right now. The 5 big ones that we're seeing are alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Delta is what we're seeing in the United States now. A lot of the new cases, it's probably thought to be maybe about 80% of the viruses that we're seeing. It's really transmitting very quickly. Thank goodness, the COVID vaccine covers all the variants for now. But this virus will mutate. Eventually, it'll probably become something like maybe a seasonal flu. And I told you, it's 20% of all the the colds that we get every year, the upper respiratory infections we get every year. Usually we handle, but this one was so effective at getting into us and getting us infected and reproducing. That's where the mortality came from. The rates for death have stayed pretty much stable. We know that for many months now, it's been between about 1.4 and 1.7% of the people who get COVID will die from it, if you're unaffected. Who are those folks mostly? The frail elderly, the immunocompromised, those who have a lot of comorbid conditions. It's been my experience that most of the patients I saw and I treated were infirmed and elderly. But when I was at some of these border hospitals in Texas and California, I had as many 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds on ventilators as I did 70, 80-year-olds. That's scary. Now, are there exceptions? Sure. Most of the people who get COVID have no symptoms. The vast majority are probably asymptomatic or have minor symptoms like a cold. The chance of having a problem with the vaccine, is really, really small across the board. A major anaphylactic reaction is only 2 to 5 per million. In all the vaccinations I've given tens of thousands. I saw one minor reaction. enough for me to suggest to the patient, don't get a second injection. Don't get the second one follow-up. But the chances, so again, 2 to 5 people in a million may have a major allergic reaction. As far as you hear in the press also, especially with the school-age kids, cardiac disease, pericarditis, myositis, the inflammation of the sac around the heart and the heart itself. Or you hear also about like Guillain-Barré syndrome. We hear a lot about thrombotic disorders, making blood clots as well. The chances of that are 0.0019%. That's 1 or 2 cases out of 100,000 of that happening, related possibly to the vaccine. We don't even know if it's related to the vaccine yet or not, or if it's just background information. So compared to the risk of dying, 1 to 2 per 100 versus 1 or 2 in 100,000 for the vaccine is not a it's not a bad part of the equation. For me, that's a no-brainer. And that's why the vaccines have been made earlier than people anticipated. You hear a lot of folks will say, oh, the vaccines were pushed out way too early. Way too early. I wanted them to be tested first. Understand, historically, it used to take, with SARS and with MERS, it took 20 to 22 months to develop a vaccine. With the messenger RNA platforms that came out, they did it in under 10 months. Now, does that mean the FDA could say, oh, we got the vaccine, go ahead and give it? No. They still had to do the phase 1 human, the phase 2 human, the phase 3 human trials. They had to do safety trials even before it was ever released to make sure that it was safe. So that was what really held us up. The mRNA platforms were developed 10 years ago. Messenger RNA platforms developed 10 years ago specifically for this purpose. We knew that if we had to get a vaccine in a hurry, we needed to be able to produce something as quickly as we possibly could. And that's what happened. We have the time and still went through the safety trials to show it was safe. Sure, I understand the trepidation, but now we have millions of vaccines out there and with millions of data points under our belt. And most folks seem to have more problem with the common flu shot that we get every year, the trivalent or quadrivalent flu shot, than we have seen with the coronavirus. So I understand why we got the vaccine out early. Can you imagine the number of lives that were saved specifically because we were able to get that vaccine? Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of vaccines, rather than wait another year, when we would have still been in the throes of this otherwise. So, I wanted to share with you also, again, my job here isn't informational. I had my chance of sitting in the seat. I made some hard decisions before, and I understand some of the machinations that you have to go through, and I firmly appreciate everything you do for our community, and especially for our students and their parents and well, everybody in the community. So I want to share with you the latest CDC recommendations. These aren't necessarily Tim Campbell's recommendations, but as of July 27th, these are the ones that were just published. 3 main ones that I pulled out of, like 4 or 5 of them all told. 1, recommend that fully vaccinated people wear a mask in public areas in areas of substantial or high transmission. Well, that sounds like a kind of a vague term. What's the substantial or high transmission? They break it down into 4 or 5 different categories. So I actually went through the CDC site to see how they define that. It's basically percentage of increases from previous cases. Allegheny County and all the surrounding counties, except for Westmoreland, are considered substantial risk for transmission with the Delta variant, which is going on now. Westmoreland County was a phase lower than us, I think like baseline or something like that, nothing really ominous. So the CDC has real online map information that's really of the active cases, and as of this morning, Allegheny County and most of the surrounding counties are substantial but not high rates of admission. The second thing that they recommended, that fully vaccinated people, again, fully vaccinated people might choose to wear a mask regardless of the level of transmission, particularly if they are immunocompromised, or if they have increased risk for severe disease from COVID-19, or if somebody in their household is at increased risk, or if they've not been fully vaccinated. And I think that makes kind of common sense. I mean, if I'm at risk, or if somebody I love and live with is at risk, I don't necessarily want to bring something home to them. I'll take the extra abundance of caution. I don't like wearing masks, but I'll put it on if I could help them a little bit more. Now listen to this next recommendation. This is specific to each and every single one of you. It's as school directors. CDC recommends, this is as of last Wednesday, recommends universal indoor masking for teachers, staff, students, and visitors to schools, regardless of vaccination status. Again, I can understand where they're coming from. Decidedly, school-age children, unless they have health concerns, they're very, very unlikely to suffer a bad outcome with acute COVID. But kids could be asymptomatic carriers. Kids may have minor symptoms, snotty nose, cough, little sore throat. You won't even think too much about. Maybe it's allergies, maybe it's a cold. But how can you tell if a kid picked up COVID from school versus playing with their friends afterwards at school? Or how do you really tell the difference if they were maybe picked up at a club or a sporting event, that they were involved, extracurricular activities out of the school property, or at a church activity? You can't. We just can't do that. We did all the contact tracing before, but found out that really didn't work as well as we thought it would have worked. It's not the kids that I'm primarily concerned about with the COVID, unless they're immunocompromised. Much higher risk are their parents, their grandparents, the frail elderly folks who may be caregivers at home, the sick, the ill, the immunocompromised. They're the ones that I worry about more because they're the ones that have the higher chance of dying. Brentwood, Broughton, Bethel Park, partnership with Spartan Pharmacy. Do you know how many vaccines were administered, all told? 60,000 vaccines. Mostly Pfizer and Moderna. Each person got 2 shots. 30,000 people in our area were completely immunized. Statistically, that saves, if you go about 1.4, 1.5%, 450 lives. 450 lives of our neighbors, friends, everybody, your family could possibly have been saved in our collective area by those 60,000 vaccines that were given. It matters. It really matters. This isn't rocket science. This is not rocket science. So, what does this have to do with masking? Everything. Because if enough people had the vaccines, we would have enough people protected. We wouldn't have to wear a mask. In Pennsylvania, they lifted the masking mandate in June, and we seemed to be doing fine for a while. It looked like we had achieved some degree of herd immunity. But who's getting infected now? Who are these pop cases that are popping? Who do you think?
Unvaccinated.
The unvaccinated. The unvaccinated are the ones who are popping positive now. And unfortunately, they're getting exposed to the Delta variant, which is, as I said, much more infectious, much more transmissible. So yes, predictably, we'll see a little bit of spike with them. So what do we do? Do we wear the mask forever? Absolutely not. I have no desire to ask masks. As soon as I was outside of 6 foot, first thing I did was peel my mask off and shoved it in my pocket. But we don't really have a lot of other options. We really, truly don't have a lot of options. Aside from my vaccination, I don't have much else that'll protect me. Are we vaccinating kids? Well, yeah, Pfizer's been approved now for 12 and older, but what about those who are less than 12 years of age? What about our elementary school kids? What about those in the early parts of middle school? We don't know if the vaccine will even help these kids yet. That's being studied. We just don't have the answers to that. We don't know if it'll reduce transmission in these kids and in that particular age group. We suspect it does, but the science isn't there yet. But the kids, if they get it, again, as I shared, they're more likely to survive the events. It still needs to be studied, and we really need to see if giving a vaccine will help these kids or if it's better for them to fight it on their own if they get exposed to it. But again, what are the options? Mask. And even our data on masking is very soft. When I was on deployment, we used N95 masks, not the flimsy type of masks, the surgical masks we put in our pocket. Logarithmic difference as far as the amount of protection it could afford you. Masks are cumbersome. They're uncomfortable. They could be hot and sweaty, especially in the summer. They're absolutely no fun. But what are the downsides? There really are precious few. All last year, with all my deployments, not a single member of my DMAT team popped positive for COVID. And why? Because we were meticulous with our mask use. And again, we were using N95s when we were having direct patient care. We were using the other regular surgical masks when we weren't, when we weren't in a COVID-saturated environment. But we were in ICUs that were full COVID patients. We were putting lines in them. I'm putting tubes in their throat, putting them on ventilators, trying to keep them alive long enough that they'll be able to heal. We washed our hands. We wore our masks. We wore our gloves. We ate separately from each other, 6 feet. We would get in an elevator with another person, mask goes right on. Those are just the precautions we had. That was all before vaccination. And again, not a single one of us popped positive. We had no other options. The Pennsylvania Department of Health and Allegheny County Department of Health have not given any firm recommendations recently, compared or even augmenting those that are given to us from the CDC. We have heard nothing from them as of yet. I'm suspect that we will shortly. Pennsylvania, actually, compared to a lot of other states, in our region, we have higher vaccination rates than a lot of other places in the United States. But even today, this morning, the information that was released from Allegheny County suggested there were 320 new cases in Allegheny County over the last 3 days. That's a little deceptive. Of those 320 cases, only 198 were confirmed. The other ones probable or suspected. They'll use those terms. So those numbers are bantered around a little bit. School directors, I believe the next 3 weeks will be most telling. We'll see how the numbers evolve. We'll see if there's a sustained elevation in the number of new cases. And regardless, I don't think we're going to see anything like we saw last year, because we have, I believe truly, I'm optimistic that I believe the worst of this is over. It's not over for you if you have COVID, or somebody you love has COVID and possibly dies from it. But I don't think we're going to see the spikes like we did. And if you look at the data from this year with that amount of vaccinations under our belt, historically, usually 2 weeks after a holiday, we'll see a blip. We'll see an uprise. And then, because incubation time for COVID, anywhere from 2 to 14 days, that's why you isolate you for 14 days. Nobody's ever been shown positive after 11. So we keep it on the 14-day side for the isolation. But the average is 5.4 days. So it takes a while for folks to spread through the community before we start seeing that rise to occur. We see it'll continue for about 4 weeks and then it'll decrease. And we saw that after Labor Day, after 4th of July last year. We saw it after Memorial Day. We saw it after New Year's. We saw it after Thanksgiving. It's a trend. It's just something we could observe. So we saw a little blip now. When did this start? A couple weeks ago with the Delta variant? Oh, what was it before that? 4th of July. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, I pray for it, that we've already seen the worst of this little bump with the Delta variant here in Pittsburgh. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think some of the most damning and the most confusing course we could take is to establish firm plans now. We've got, 3 weeks before school starts, the 24th, I think it is? That's 3 weeks worth of data points. Right now we're looking at a snapshot. I want to see the motion picture. I want to see what's going to evolve over the next 3 weeks. I think that would provide a lot more clarity to the community, to the parents, to the students, than necessarily making a mandate now and saying, okay, we're going to have to walk that back and then reverse that again. It might be the prudent thing to do is to wait and to see. It is a decision not to make a decision. If I'm in my practice and I have a patient with a diagnostic conundrum that I'm really trying to figure out, I will not rush to a diagnosis and rush to a treatment plan. I might wait for my physical examination to see how it evolves. I might be a little bit more diligent with my history. I might do what I can to grab more data points, more laboratory, more radiological imaging, so I can make a firm diagnosis and treat the patient right the first time. That's probably some of the best counsel I can give to you. The pandemic has been fluid. Our response has been and must be fluid as well. As we've learned before, we gather more data, we analyze it, we get a better understanding of a thoughtful, meaningful response on how to broach this. Let's learn, like the virus is doing, to adapt, to shift our responses as needed. And again, it's a hard decision you have to make. I understand that. But I think I would counsel you, and I think it's wise, gather more data points before you commit to a formal treatment plan, so to speak. I think that would help you out a lot in the long run and bolster a lot of community confidence in the community as well. Because I know, as a parent, as a grandparent, I'm watching a grandchild when they were doing the virtual learning at home. I had to change my schedule. It was bumps in the road for everybody. I know it was bumps in the road for each one of you as well. So I hope this was helpful. I just want, again, I wasn't here to go ahead and make any decisions, make hard and firm recommendations. All I want to do is just provide the data so you can deliberate and make the meaningful decisions, go through the machinations and the calculus yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. We really appreciate that very much. If I could maybe briefly summarize what you said. You said vaccinations are the key for the future for everybody, and they are safe. And you also indicated that we have 3 weeks to collect data before school starts. And right now, our safety plan is recommending masks but not mandating masks. And it's parental option, and that's what we'll be passing tonight. And I'll still have 3 weeks, so we can meet again if we find that the numbers continue to go up or that the children are affected more so too.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable across the board. Again, more data point helps, more information helps, and we've got the luxury of seeing what this little blip does. If historically what has taken place previously, this might very well decrease. And the number of cases, there aren't tremendous. As I said, 300 and some cases over 3 days, but of that, 198 were really truly positive. You compare that to a year ago, trivial in comparison. So we need to let that shape our decisions as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Dr. Kim,
Sure.
thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it.
That was my bathroom writing this morning, yeah.
I just wanted to seek a couple points of clarification. So when my concern, just first of all, is throughout the fall into the winter, we made decisions to protect from community spread that necessarily were difficult decisions for all of us, and we had different ideas of what was best for children in particular. So my concern with this, while you say masks are cumbersome and uncomfortable, are we making these decisions for the unvaccinated to protect from community spread, and we're setting more obstacles in front of children? That's my concern. So.
I think masks are secondary. I still think absolutely emphatically the vaccinations are really what's going to make the key to this all going away, where we could put away the mask forever. As soon as we have enough folks who are really immunized. It's a shared, we're almost there. Is it a public health concern? Absolutely, emphatically, yes. Children are part of the public health spectrum. You know, they can influence tremendously what happens with, again, especially our most vulnerable, frail elderly. You know, so I see where you're coming from. I really, truly do. What are our options, as I shared? We don't have a lot of other ones until we get more folks vaccinated. You know, that's the bottom line. And yeah, masks are bothersome. They're no fun. You know, we don't know how effective they really are. We don't think they're as effective as we would like to believe, but they seem to be better than nothing. It's my observation also. My grandkids, they tolerate the face mask much better than I do. You know, they're much more compliant. But again, we've got wiggle room. We've got 3 weeks worth of wiggle room. Use it wisely. And then if necessary, yeah, have an emergency meeting prior to the, a safety meeting prior to the start of the school year so we can flex with the virus. Other questions, folks?
Yeah, I had one other one. On
Sure,
the,
Rick.
in our last meeting, we had some people kind of speaking out against the masks, and one person, I think, talked about maybe the health risks associated with it due to the increased CO2 concentration levels in the mask.
Yeah.
And they cited a paper, and I went and read that paper, and it was a peer review paper, and there was a lot of comments in that peer review paper that questioned the measurement devices. Did they have the resolution, the accuracy, that level of CO2 concentration to predict it? Was the placement in an area where there was transient circulation of oxygen, CO2, you know, were they measuring in a, and I was just wondering what your point was, your view, not your point, but your view is.
There's so many different variables involved with this, it's not even funny. Prior to COVID, I lived in surgical masks for years. I've lived in, every time we were in the hospital, if I had a patient TB or any kind of infectious diseases, I would be in a mask for hours on end. I still am. On my aeromedical evacuation missions, I was in N95s and the level B suits, the space suits that you see, because I'm in airplanes with people with COVID. And I wasn't able to pee for 18 hours because we couldn't strip out of our suits and had to remain in the masks. Did it affect our CO2 levels? No. But what if a person is a CO2 retainer? What if a person's in frail health? What if they've had like a particularly high acid diet, which is going or a high carbohydrate diet, which is going to make them produce a lot more CO2? There are so many variables that a study such as that, and I'm familiar with that one, you can't really hang everything on it that you want to, But again, Folks are scared. They're scared. You know, they don't want to have, they want some sort of remedy. They want some sort of quick solution. They want to have an excuse, reason, not so much an excuse, but a reason not to do it. Same thing with the vaccines. Folks have valid concerns for not getting the vaccines. Some of my coworkers, if they were, say, pregnant, or if they're breastfeeding, or if they're trying to conceive, we don't have good data. We know that many people who've been pregnant on the vaccine don't have any issues with it at all. Perfectly normal pregnancies, no higher differences than the baseline that you normally would see. But we just don't know. And again, we did not have the luxury of waiting 2 years to complete all the studies to go ahead and say that, yes, this has no higher risks. So what do? We did the phase 3 trials. We proved that it was safe. We spilled it out. We saved tens and hundreds of thousands of lives in doing so. Worldwide, probably millions of lives. Jim?
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Doc, for your presentation. You made reference to CDC, Pennsylvania Department of Health, and Allegheny Health Department. Right now, everybody's been in line, but for us on our end, the final board that we have to listen to would be, is the Allegheny County Health Department would be the one who could make decisions that affect what we do, right?
And I think this decision so far has come out that, you know, again, this information from the CDC was just last Wednesday. A lot of people are still trying to process it. I spilled out to you the latest and greatest that there is out there. So I don't know what with their calculus and what they're going to use for their metric to go ahead and say, okay, push it forward to the school boards or push it to the individual municipalities. I can't think for them, you know, but.
Does the county health department have the authority?
No, actually, the school board has the authority.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not so sad that I don't have to sit in those seats anymore. Any other questions, folks? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc, very much.
Other public comments on agenda items?
Dan Grisbeck, 2763 Milford Drive. I didn't think I'd have to follow Mr. Campbell, Dr. Campbell rather, so this should be fun. I certainly don't share his level of expertise. However, I would like to comment on agenda item G1, the health and safety plan ratification. Specifically, I'd like to encourage you to revise your health and safety plan to add universal masking for the start of the school year, consistent with a recommendation by the CDC as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. The Pennsylvania Department of Education instructs districts to follow CDC guidelines to the extent practicable. Failing to mandate masks is inconsistent with this instruction, in my opinion. We know masks work. Based on the studies that I've read, this has been proven in now dozens of studies, Leffler 2020, Van Dyke 2020, Payne 2020, which found that the universal use of face masks decreased community spread of COVID by up to 70%. Additionally, numerous studies have shown that masks are not harmful. Sheen 2021 and Chan 2020 analyzed oxygen saturation, as well as oxygen and carbon dioxide partial pressures, and found no difference between masked and unmasked individuals. Barry, the study that you specifically cited, Wallach 2021, has actually been redacted by JAMA. Part of the reasoning being, as you mentioned, the device they used to measure the carbon dioxide content was not rated for that level of carbon dioxide, but in my opinion, and my wife is an ICU nurse, she's dealt with COVID for the entirety of the pandemic, the tidal volume of a typical adult or child that's going to be scaled down is about 500 cc's, 500 milliliters. The amount that's inside your mask, what they are measuring, is maybe a tenth of that. So what you're measuring is not actually the inhaled carbon dioxide, and that's why looking at something like blood gas content or pulse oximetry, like the studies that I referenced did, is a much better way to go about this. I've heard the statement previously that no one else is mandating masks. When we go to grocery stores, restaurants, they're not mandating masks. So universal masking in school really won't do any good. To that, I'd ask, where else are students spending 7 hours a day in an indoor environment in close proximity to 20 other people? Additionally, the idea that individual choice that's being trotted out, it doesn't really apply to masks. They function as source control. So if two students are in a room and one is masked and the other isn't, the student without the mask is more likely to transmit COVID to the student who is masked than vice versa. The student's desire to be protected is negated by the other student choosing not to wear a mask. My biggest concern in all of this is the effect that failing to mandate masks will have on ensuring students receive in-person education for the upcoming school year. After seeing what students went through last year, I believe that maximizing the amount of time in the classroom is the single most important thing that we can do for our students. Failing to mandate masks is in direct opposition to this goal. A study performed throughout Georgia elementary schools last year found that schools that failed to mandate masks had 50% more COVID cases than schools that did mandate masks. That's 50% more students who get pulled out of class and are forced to quarantine, 50% more parents who have to call off work to take care of their child. And this is only going to get worse due to the increase in transmission and vaccine breakthrough potential for the Delta variant. Leading districts like South Fayette have already made the decision to mandate masks for the start of the school year, rather than waiting until after there's an outbreak. I ask that you ignore the politicization of masks and make the decisions supported by the available data and leading experts. Thank you, and I apologize for going over a little bit.
Thank you. Any other public comments tonight on agenda items?
Sharon Janisic. Is this one on?
Maybe turn that one off.
Sharon, no, it's worse. Sharon Janisic, 4314 Anna Street. Yes, I agree with Dr. Campbell and Mr. Grisbick. I would like you very much to consider making masks mandatory. It would be totally awesome to me to be able to say anyone who's unvaccinated, but I can understand you may not want to gather that data and secure it, in which case your alternative is to say everyone be masked. I think Dr. Campbell has a good idea to wait and see what happens with the data over the next couple of weeks. One of my concerns in looking at the safety plan is there isn't anything in there indicating what might happen, what levels we might reach where you might consider it again. Is it going to be if we have 10% of students in quarantine, 50%? If we have to close a building because there aren't adults? There has to be a point at which we re-examine that. I also had a question on the health and safety plan. It talks about when students are in quarantine, they will be given remote instruction, but there isn't anything in there defining what that remote instruction might be. And I'm imagining families where the entire family is in quarantine. Are they going to be able to come to the school and pick up the books? I'm thinking you wouldn't want that, but how are we going to handle what is coming? Thank you very much.
Other public comments?
Kathleen Kroll, 2211 Milford. I'm here tonight to speak on the issue of the voluntary masking in schools. As some of you know, I'm a teacher in another district, a district that will have mandatory masking for all students and staff this fall. My district is committed to protecting the younger children and the vulnerable members of our school community, and they've chosen to follow the recommendations of the majority of medical experts because they realize that our first obligation as a school is to keep our students safe. Masks have been shown time and time again in peer-reviewed study after study to markedly slow the spread of COVID-19. Study after study has also shown that masks do not harm the people wearing them. I truly don't understand why so many people in Bethel Park are so rigidly opposed to taking the simplest of recommended steps to protect the other members of our community and to help keep our schools open. The idea that we, as laymen, are more knowledgeable than epidemiologists and other medical experts in regard to a novel virus is hubris at its worst, because not only is the decision to not mask personally risky, it willingly endangers the health and lives of others. The district has a lawyer to advise on legal matters, curriculum experts to advise on teaching, and brings in experts in other fields as needed to help make informed, knowledgeable decisions for the benefit of the district and our students. I don't understand why the district is not taking the advice of medical experts in regard to medical matters, and I urge the board and administration to reconsider the voluntary mask policy. Thank you.
Any other public comments at this time? 3 phone calls? Okay. Thank you.
Danielle, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, you're up.
All right, thanks. Let me mute. Okay. So, thank you.
We need your address.
As a healthcare professional
Name
and
and
mother
address.
of an elementary
No,
school
can you
child
give,
who had the
excuse me, can you give your name and address real quick?
Sure can. Danielle, and I'm at 2325 Wells Drive in Bethel Park. So as a healthcare professional and mother of an elementary school child who had the entire last year of remote learning, I'm truly concerned for the health and safety of the 5 to 12-year-old students if universal masking is not mandated. This age group is not yet eligible for vaccination, and it's the only level of protection that they currently have against COVID-19, as masking, social distancing, and proper hand hygiene. Even during last school year, COVID cases were in the schools even while masking was mandated. If even a few parents in each classroom chose unmasking, COVID cases would predictably rise as counts are climbing in all the states, most states in the United States. The current Delta variant is much higher in transmission, with studies showing 1,000 times the viral load. It's affecting more people at once, making them sicker faster than prior mutations, including some breakthrough cases in vaccinated individuals. There's even multiple reports in southern states of children requiring ICU placement and intubation. Nobody wants to see any of our children in that situation. The CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics are advising universal masking in schools, as well as local pediatrician groups. The health and safety of our children need to be the first priority over the politics of non-masking versus masking beliefs. Our children should be able to learn in a safe environment without additional stress or concern for their health. This past year was very difficult for them in learning remotely, lack of socialization, and mental health. We need to come together as a group and think of what is best for the health and well-being of others around us, not just considering what someone does or does not want to do for themselves. Please consider masking mandates, especially in the under 12-year-old student population who do not have vaccine eligibility at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Leslie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Leslie, name and address.
Leslie Bidelson at 765 Marble Valley Drive.
Okay,
And I
you're
also
up.
wanted to talk about the mask. Thank you.
Yep.
First, I wanted to state how disappointed I was watching last month's meeting. I mean, I think our children should be able to watch these meetings and learn from them. And so I'm hoping, like, in the future, like this meeting has been, we can treat each other with consideration and speak respectfully. Now, I strongly disagree with the board's interpretation of the CDC guidelines. The CDC, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, the Allegheny County Health Department, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and many local pediatricians support requiring face masks in schools. Not one of these organizations is stating masks are unnecessary. Now, I understand that some children do not want to wear them. There's also some kids that do not want to sit in their car seats, but that doesn't mean that we abandon their safety. It's our job to make sure they are safe. I believe that we want all our children to be able to continue with in-person learning. Masks have been shown to be effective at protecting our children. Not only have they been effective, but for the school district, they are a no-cost solution. Why wouldn't we implement a mask policy that was successful for the school district last year? Especially as case numbers are rapidly rising. Just today, Allegheny County moved into a substantial risk category. And more children are having severe symptoms. Now, I want my school district to be proactive rather than reactive. I want to be able to tell my 6-year-old that her school district understands and will follow all of the guidelines from the doctors and scientists that we have told her for over the past year are vital to keeping us and our community safe. The very same guidelines that she followed last year in the same school. Personally, I was very proud of how our teachers rose to the challenges that they faced and how the school worked to keep our children safe and in person. What I don't understand is the reasoning for removing a highly effective layer of protection for children who are currently unable to be vaccinated. Thank you.
All right, Julianne, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, name and address, and you're on.
Hi, this is Julianne Bowles, 3237 Postgate Drive. Thank you all for your service, and thank you, Dr. Campbell. Today, it is important to acknowledge how much our whole community wants our children to learn together in the classroom this year. It is also important to acknowledge that the best way to achieve our shared goal of an in-person school year is to follow the clear public health guidelines, including universal masking. The Pennsylvania Department of Health, Allegheny County Health Department, American Academy of Pediatrics, and scores of local pediatricians, such as Kids Pediatrics and Dr. Campbell, have come out in support of following the current CDC guidelines and requiring universal masking. The Delta variant is here, and it is dramatically more contagious, possibly more severe, and sometimes it makes vaccinated people infect others. The Delta variant threatens not only our children's health, but also their ability to have an uninterrupted education in the classroom this year. All children under 12 are unvaccinated. Universal masking is necessary because masks work best as source control. Your mask protects me, my mask protects you. So if you send your child to school without a mask, and I send my child with an underlying condition to school in a mask, ironically, your child is more protected than mine in a room with the two of them. That's why mask optional policies don't work. They just leave every child at risk. The CDC, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, Allegheny County Health Department, and local pediatricians understand this. And that's why they are calling for universal masking to keep our children safe and in their classrooms this year. Additionally, Pennsylvania House Bill 605 will not protect the district from COVID-related liabilities if the district does not follow CDC guidelines. This proposed bill is designed to protect schools and businesses from getting sued for COVID infections or outbreaks, but the bill only covers those who follow all public directives. The bill defines public directives as orders and guidelines. Following these guidelines became even more urgent today when Allegheny County entered the substantial community spread category. And finally, as we strive to be best in class, please note that the current best in class, South Fayette School District, posted their health and safety plan on Thursday, which states that they will always follow current CDC guidelines, including the universal mask requirement. I'm sorry, but you are wrong that you have more time. Your decision last meeting already put my daughter at risk.
Your 2 minutes are up.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other phone calls?
That is it for now.
Okay. All right. Our first item items are in the curriculum committee. Vince, Mr. Scalzo, would you please, I think you could take them together.
Okay. Under Curriculum Committee, we have 2 items. First item, 2021-2022 student handbooks, and number 2, independent studies and marketing. I would like to move both items.
I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Spacuzza. Any comments, questions on these 2 items? It didn't look like there were many dramatic changes in the handbooks at all. Ms. Wells, no? Okay.
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Thank you. Personnel Committee, Mr. McGregor.
Okay, there are 8 items underneath Personnel Committee. I'll read all 8 out, and I know we're going to talk about number 2, or Dr. Walsh would like to talk about number 2. Approval of Extra Duty Responsibility Program, 21-22. Acceptance of resignations, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Approval of staffing change. Appointment of personnel. Change of assignment. Approval of job description. MOU with the Bethel Park Federation of Teachers, and an MOU with the Bethel Park Federation of Teachers.
I need a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Christensen. Comments or questions or on any of these items? Dr. Walsh, did you?
Well, I did already share the best wishes message from Marilyn Williams, who's on the agenda for your approval tonight to accept her retirement letter. There are some other items on there, for instance, the staffing changes, a title change. You have some appointment of professional staff, which I'll introduce after your motion. There is the revised job description for a Director of Technology position, which is currently posted. That posting closes tomorrow, so we can start to call those applications and move forward. There's 2 MOUs with the Federation. One speaks to additional staff using grant funds, ESSER's money, and the other speaks to using our Bethel teachers and our Bethel curriculum to offer remote instruction next year for those in need.
Any other questions or comments about any of those items?
I apologize. Was there a second that was?
Mr. Christensen.
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Yeah, so thank you. If you can interject here again. One of the professional staff you approved tonight is a special ed teacher, Kristen Heinzel, who's going to be relocating from her home in North Carolina to Bethel Park. She's not here with us this evening, but we'll invite her to join and meet the board at a future occasion. Laura Grimm is here. Laura's sitting in the back. Laura, you approved her as a new assistant athletic director, coming to us after 6 or 7 years in the Ringgold School District in this position as an athletic director. And we're lucky to have her and bring that expertise. You want to come up and say hi to the board here, Laura?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I just wanted to, say that I'm very excited to start off in this new role and very appreciative of the opportunity. So I look forward to getting to meet you here in the next couple of weeks and get to know you a little better and, get to work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
And also the board approved the appointment of Mandy Figlioli as our new curriculum coordinator for STEAM education K through 12. And the board would know from the round of interviews that she comes with a lot of years of experience in assistant to the superintendent position, where she was instrumental in bringing STEAM and maker education to the Burgettstown Area School District. And we're looking forward to having her here to do that and take us to our next best.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm honored to be a part of this team and also, like Laura said, to get to work and making our programs best in class. Also very excited to meet the students and the staff, the parents, the community members. It's been wonderful to meet the board of directors. You've been incredibly involved in the process, and that shows your commitment to education. And very excited to collaborate with Ms. Wells and the other administrators. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Spacuzza?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Dobus. There are 2 items this evening under Facility and Services. I'd like to move the following 2 items. The approval of the replacement flooring at the Memorial Elementary School, classrooms 3, 5, 7. It's done by CoStars and Franklin Interiors at a cost of $15,675. And the purchase of marquee signs for the administration building, Independence Middle School, a total cost from Fast Signs of $54,849.44, paid from the Capital Reserve Fund.
I need a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Nagel. Questions or comments on these? I don't think that they've come up before. The marquee signs maybe have come up before, but
The marquee signs, are they going to be the marquee signs like that are at the high school that large, that are able to do all the notices and those kinds of things, so we're not out there with letters anymore that fall off.
Correct. It will eliminate the ransom letter signs. So,
You may want to share a couple of those with the elementary schools that still have them, though. They're falling
yes,
again.
but they will be LED readout signs with, I'm working with the borough right now to determine how many different readouts we can have in a time interval, but it'll be nice to be able to portray information timely.
Mr. Fierce, one other question. Have we gotten approval from the municipality yet, or the
I
planning
am-
commission, or
I am
sign?
currently working with them. I am in the process of writing variances because of the changeover with the LED readouts and the lighting and everything.
Yeah, I only asked that question because I remember the high school sign very well.
Yes.
It's still the same.
Thank you.
So the second one was put in as discussion, so I am going to open the first one, but we are voting on both of those? Is that correct?
Say that again?
So when this was put into board docs, it was put in as an action and a discussion. So number 2 was put in as a discussion, so you can't vote on it. But I will make a note, if we vote on the first one, that both of these are going to be passed instead of voting on the second one. Does that make sense?
Was it supposed to be in the committee?
Can you change that real quick? Yeah, it's supposed to.
Well, since it has the type sorry, thank you. Since it has the type listed as discussion, now it reads like a motion, but I'm gonna ask for a vote to change it to an action item, because you're changing an agenda item.
Okay, so do we do that before we do
that
anything
before.
right now?
Right.
Oh, I see.
And then as a secondary item.
It is discussion.
So what you wanna do is vote on the first one, the replacement flooring separately.
Okay.
And then do, just to make it
Two,
cleaner.
2 items.
Yeah, and then 2 items on the marquee, to change it from discussion to action, and then to approve the motion.
Before we do that, may I ask, is it wise to vote for the purchase of something before we have the approval to install it? Should we allow the process to take place, or do we need to purchase that?
I was along the lines of trying to get the approval to purchase, so once I get through the borough process, we can just go ahead and make sure we can get this as timely as possible. I felt this was the more appropriate first step.
So purchasing is conditional upon getting
Correct.
permits?
Correct.
If I can just add one point too, it takes a considerable amount of time to construct the marquees, both of them. So we're looking for lead time with that as well.
And if between the approval and the purchase time, if the price of the marquees increases or decreases, would we have to vote again because we're voting on a dollar amount?
You're voting on the quotes that are attached. So I would imagine these have a time amount attached to them, they usually do.
How long is that quote good for?
Doesn't say on the agenda item, oh no, it does. The estimates are valid for a period of 30 days.
yeah.
After you received it. It was generated on July 19th, so that price is good till August 19th approximately. Yeah.
In our experience, it usually takes longer than 30 days to get that approved.
And personally, I wouldn't be as concerned, but I know from being in a construction industry, prices are fluctuating very rapidly and very drastically right now. That's why I'm asking these questions.
So can we move it to the August 22nd?
meeting on the 24th.
So if,
Yeah,
to
let's move
clarify.
it to the 24th.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Do we need a motion to move it to the 24th?
It's not in the voting right now.
You don't
Was
need any
discussion?
motion, if you're gonna just vote on it on the 24th, then you discussed it tonight, and you'll just take a vote
Okay.
right now on item 1 under
Okay,
Now,
only on item 1.
your
On,
facilities.
on the 24th, would they be able to revise the price on the quote if that's necessary without us having further discussion? Or-
Sure. why
Before
not?
the 24th, you'll have, this price will have expired.
Right.
So you'll have to get a new estimate.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're only voting on number 1, the replacement flooring at Memorial, and this was part of the, I guess, an annual update process that is necessary yearly?
Correct. It's, as carpet wears, it gets to the end of its service life, it needs replaced.
Yeah, okay. All right, voting only on number
Okay,
1.
apologize once again. The second was the person who made the second.
Can
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Okay, Mr. Christensen? Finance?
For the Finance Committee, there's 2 items, and I move to adopt the lease agreement with Lois Johnson Learning and Child Care Center and to adopt the transportation bus run plan.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Modrak. Questions or comments on any of these? On either of these?
All right, voting is open. Motion passes.
Ms. Turner?
There's 4 items tonight. None are up for third reading. The first one is a revision of policy, second of third reading. The weapons, the terroristic threats, the hazing. Policies being rescinded is the electronic record signature, which we fixed last meeting. Approval of policies, threats and assessment, and school police officers' use of force and weapons. That's for the first reading. And revisions of policies for the first reading for bullying, cyberbullying, dating violence, emergency preparedness and response, and school security personnel. And I believe this one all had to do with additional changes to title. Yeah, threat assessment.
Threat
Sorry.
assessment updates.
And that threat assessment is the mandated
Yes.
in-service at the beginning of the year? Okay.
Yeah. Right, schools are required now to have threat assessment teams, so they updated policy so that those, if the particular infractions were occurring, the threat assessment team could be involved.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Mr. Modrak, will you take other, please?
Yes. 1 second, please. Other, we have 2 items here tonight. First one is Health and Safety Plan ratification, and the second item is a student settlement agreement and release. I'd like to see both if we can separate those 2 items for their votes.
Okay, I need a motion for the first one. I need a second for the first
Second.
one. Seconded by Mr. Christensen. Comments or concerns about that? Based on lots of conversations and emails and so forth, my concern is the concern that some people have raised, and that would be if we revisit this in 3 weeks, what will create the data that we feel that we should revisit it, and then if we do, what date should we have the meeting? I think that I'd like to be clear about that before I would vote for this, because I don't want it to just go by the wayside and school opens. So I don't know if anyone has any clear answers about that, but what kind of, what data would necessitate us having a meeting to mandate masks at this time?
I went on, after Dr. Campbell talked, I was on the Allegheny County website, especially after we were getting all these links to all these different places with the comments and emails. What I was able to find is the county website updated on 7/30/2020 in Bethel Park over the last 3 months. So that would be May, June, and July. There were 144 cases, and there were 1,332 tests done. The website, as Mr. Spacuzza and I were just sitting here, just updated at 8:30 tonight. There are 153 cases over the last 3 months in Bethel Park and 1,402 tests. So that means in 3 days, Bethel Park had 9 cases. I didn't do the math for the test, but that would be almost 100 people that tested. I think it's 99. No, I can't do the.
Thank you for looking up that information. I appreciate it.
So, I mean, based on what we had done last year, we were looking at the municipality as a whole. I think if we could ask health and safety to trace this, and again, this is not, based on what Dr. Campbell said too, this website is now not updated daily. That could be, you know, causing us, you know, how fast we can get the data. That's just a concern of mine, that it's not, when we were making decisions last school year, this website was updated daily. It is not now. So my thing was, the other thing too is overall, since the pandemic began, Bethel Park's PCR is currently 4.5. Over the last 3 months, I did the math, but I'm not doing the math correctly, so I need a little bit more time to get you that one. But again, from 7:30 till tonight at 8:30, or 7:30, and I believe it was like 6 o'clock at night, till tonight at 8:30, there were 9 additional cases in Bethel Park. And if I can do math quickly, it was 70 tests and 9 cases. So your PCR is probably, your rate of infection is probably quite low.
Yeah, my question is just what will move us to have another meeting or to change our, I mean, I really would like to have the administration or safety director or whatever to say, if we reach this point, we're going to have another meeting and you can reevaluate.
Well, that was one of my questions with Dr. Campbell, and I apologize for not expressing it. I think at some point, the county will have authority over our decisions, is my question. You know, at this point in time, as our administration is working with the county, at one point, we may not have that ability to make a local decision if the county health department, who has the legal authority over Allegheny County residents and the school districts, comes down and makes a mandate. So as these numbers, if they do continue to increase, it may be, that was my point, it may be out of our hands. And that could be up to next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or sometime in the fall. And hopefully everyone understands that as we move forward.
I would say that if we're in the substantial range where the CDC clearly advises, you know,
I
for
thought we
masks.
were. Allegheny County is insubstantial.
Yeah, we moved
Can't
there
find
now.
that.
But
We can't
with-
find that on the website. Okay, but it's not on the Allegheny County website.
So when we get closer, I agree we should wait. As we get closer, maybe the Thursday before school starts, meet again, take a look at the data. You know, so far, you know, last time we heard all this stuff about personal rights, I don't really, you know, personal freedoms, I don't really buy into that. We're hearing today, because of the news, about the increase in the Delta variant. Of course, that's, you know, related to safety. It's something that I think we're all concerned about. But the thing we haven't really talked about is the quality of education in the classroom and students wearing masks. I've talked to a lot of teachers about, you know, the inability to see facial expressions on students when they're in the classroom, the engagement of students when they're in the classroom wearing a mask. And so you know, it's one of these risk balance exercises we have to go through, but I think it's not just about being 100% safe, it's also about balancing the effectiveness of delivering education, the engagement of students in the classroom. And so, you know, based on the numbers today, I don't want to just jump to saying, yeah, we need masks. I agree 100% with what Dr. Campbell said. Let's wait, and if we're still in the substantial range, we have to get together. I don't think there's any universal metrics, okay? We haven't been given those outside of some mandate between now and then, but we're gonna have to get together and debate it again.
Did you want to say something, Dr. Jensen?
Yeah, just with all due respect, I'd just like to remind the board that we have the ability to approve the plan and make a change to the plan before the next board meeting. In other words, the plan doesn't have to wait a whole month till the next board meeting to make changes if we need to make changes. And of course, if we see an increase in student population becoming infected, if we see an increase of hospitalization, I mean, those are two benchmarks that we would consider. Obviously, if a mandate does come through, it's in our plan that we would follow that mandate. So right now, we're kind of holding where we are with the understanding that we have the ability to change when we need to change it.
And Mrs. Dobis, I'm going to borrow Mr. Spacuzza's computer because he can type as fast as I was trying to do math with a pen and the 7-day moving average, according to the Allegheny County website for the whole county, there are 64 cases, new cases. 2,800 or 2,087 tests were done in the last 7 days. 64 of those were positive. Your positivity rate currently for the 7-day average in Allegheny County is 3.2. So again, I agree with Dr. Campbell. Let's follow the data. Let's see if it was if that happened to be the 4th of July, because the positivity rate is lower than it was 7 days prior.
I'm comfortable with following the data. I just don't want school to open without us reconsidering this if we need to. So I think what I hear you saying, Dr. Jansani, is that you and Dr. Walsh will stay on top of it, and if you feel the need for us to meet again or to change the plan, you will change the plan, and we will re-vote on it on the 24th. Is that what I hear?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm recommending.
Just speak up.
Ms. Zondo?
Tonight, the health and safety plan is on as a ratification, just to clarify some of the procedural questions that came up at the last meeting, which I think were complicated by my presence being virtual. But for the plan to change, I would strongly recommend the board to reconvene and debate it and discuss it again and allow public comment before it is changed. A ratification should be a measure of last resort.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay.
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Our second item is student settlement agreement and release, as recommended by our solicitor.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Nagel.
Voting is open.
Okay, I need a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting and move into the committee meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Turner and seconded by Mr. Spacuzza.
Voting is open.
Oh, I already got out of that meeting. Anthony, yes.
Okay. Voting passes.
Okay. Mr. Scalzo? We have 3 items. Do you want to lead the discussion on that?
Yes. So we have 3 items. The first item is 2021-2022 Title 1A, Title 2A, and Title 4A. Title 1A is improving basic programs, $270,758. Title 2A, supporting effective instruction, $75,706. And Title 4A, student support and academic enrichment at $23,943. Grants for a total amount of $370,405. Number 2, pre-K counts grant for 2021-2022, and that grant is in the amount of $148,750. And number 3, professional development. The Board of School Directors approves administration's recommendation to permit Dr. James Walsh to attend the PASCD 70th Annual Conference, Pennsylvania Association for Supervision and Curriculum, in the Hershey Lodge and Convention Center, Hershey, PA, from November 21st to the 23rd of 2021 at a cost of $1,178.22.
So I have a couple questions. The pre-K counts grant, is the pre-K going to occur at William Penn again? Okay. And the Title 1 and 2 and 3 is something we approve, or 4, I'm sorry. We approve that every year?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Maybe a good chance to run through the differences between Title 1, 2, and 4. Do you mind?
Sure. So the Title I funding is to improve basic programming. We at Bethel Park utilize the Title I funds to pay salaries and benefits partial for 3 reading specialists at the 3 schools that are currently designated as Title I, Memorial, Lincoln, and Ben Franklin. And then our Title II funding, we use that for classroom reduction size. Coming up for the 21-22 school year, we will utilize the 4th first grade teacher at Lincoln as the class size reduction teacher. And so that's what we will use those funds for. And we roll Title IV funding into Title I to increase the amount that we pay for the salaries for the interventions at the Title I schools provided by the reading specialists.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, Mr. Christensen then, Finance?
Can we put all 3 of those in the consent
Oh,
agenda?
thank you, I'm sorry. All 3 of those okay to go into consent agenda? Okay.
So in finance, the first 3 items, there's not a lot of data there just because of where we are in the month right now, but those are pretty standard reports. I'd recommend that those be put into the consent agenda. Item number 4 is the approval for cross-district agreement for special education. It looks like, and that's what we should maybe provide some clarification here. So this is where students from other districts are going to enroll in our special education program in Bethel Park?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And so what is it that we will be voting on in this item in the next meeting? Will it be the tuition rates?
Yeah, the terms of the agreement.
Terms of the
Yeah,
agreement,
right,
okay.
exactly what we're offering and the cost, et cetera.
Okay. Okay. And then number 5 on the agenda is the fund balance commitment. So this is where we're going to approve the commitment to the fund balance for these legal settlements. Is this, are these the same that we just voted on in this meeting for the compensatory education costs?
It is not, the student that was voted on in the prior meeting is not on an allocation yet.
Okay.
I imagine that it will come on a subsequent agenda.
Okay.
At least one of these I can confirm was a prior settlement, and I assume the other ones are too. I just didn't have an opportunity to reconcile the student ID numbers.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I was just wondering if there's somehow linked to what we just voted on.
There would not be an item asking for allocation of funds unless the board had approved the settlement.
Okay.
So all 5 will go on consent then, Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to take other?
Sure. We have one item under other, acceptance of superintendent and assistant superintendent for administration goals.
Okay, and these goals are aligned for the public's benefit. These goals are aligned with the Pennsylvania evaluation for both superintendents and assistant superintendents, and they involve student growth and achievement, organizational leadership, human resource management, district operations and financial stewardship, and communications and community relations. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, I think they could be put on the agenda then for the next time. Do you want them to be on the consent, or do you want us to be them separate?
Separate.
Okay. They're important enough that I think
Yes.
I'd rather they be acknowledged and
Independently. Yeah.
independently, yes. Okay, at this time, we have public comments on any agenda items that you would like to bring to our attention.
Sharon Janasek, 4314 Anna Street. I just wanted to mention on the dress codes that are in the student handbooks that we passed. I was very, very happy to see the new dress code for IMS. It is a common sense dress code, which is sorely needed. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the work of, I believe it was the teaching staff who made those changes. However, I noticed that Neil Armstrong Middle School and the high school both still have the old dress code. And it seems to me that if we have a really good dress code that's good for IMS, it should be good for NAMS and good for the high school too. So I would encourage you, if you could do whatever magic we need to do to make that a universal thing, that would be absolutely fabulous. Thank you. And I did want to point out, Ms. Turner, I think you were talking about those tests in Bethel Park. You said 9 out of 70. That's actually a really high percent. It's like 12.8.
No, Mr. Spacuzza has it, and it's 2.8. It's on the Allegheny County website, it's 2.8.
Positivity in Bethel Park, if you have 70 tests and 9 positive?
It's 2.5 per the Allegheny County website, just updated this evening.
Maybe you can, I'll come look at afterwards and you can show me, because if there were 9 positives out of 70 tests, that's not right. So we may have misheard you, the numbers you were given. But that's what I wanted to mention, and thank you for considering all of the masking concerns that everyone has. We appreciate that. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Are there any phone calls? Okay. Any board comments at this time?
Have we checked the emails?
We're not doing that
We're
anymore.
not doing that
We're
anymore?
just doing
Okay.
on the phone and in
I
person.
just wanted to make sure we weren't missing
Right,
something. Okay.
right. Thank you. Board comments, anyone?
So, yeah, I'd like to just, because I try to always be transparent and explain my position on the health and safety, the masking, universal masking. I know explaining my position isn't going to make anybody happy on any side. Quite honestly, this COVID has been the least political thing that I've done in decades, making decisions based on COVID in this seat. I made a pledge to the community when I ran that I'd always keep the health, safety, and education of our children first and foremost. COVID's made that extremely difficult because our children are the least susceptible and least vulnerable to this disease. Many of the decisions we're making, we're basing on community numbers that don't really reflect our children as deeply, or we're making to prevent community spread, which before the vaccines were readily available, although I disagreed with some of the decisions, I understood it a lot more. As far as masking, I agree with Mr. Christensen. The nonverbal cues, what Dr. Campbell said, the discomfort and things like that. I think after a year of having children's education, social emotional growth setback, I want to do everything possible to remove any barriers to helping them get back on track. Any distractions, any barriers. It's not because I don't take this seriously. I'm vaccinated. I'm proudly vaccinated. The numbers that I've looked at, and I've looked at time and time again, are based on 0 to 17. I've gone further looking at numbers based on up to 24, just to kind of get a comparison. And largely, those who contract COVID in those age groups have very light symptoms, and their outcomes, hospitalizations and deaths, are almost non-existent. So I just wanted to clarify, as we're making these big decisions, the things that I'm looking at as I'm making the decisions, just so the community is aware that I'm taking this seriously, as all the board members are. I don't believe there's anybody up here who is making political decisions based on this. If you look at the party affiliations, even though we're nonpartisan positions, and the voting records, you'll see a lot of cross in all of that. This is not a political issue. This is based on the health, safety, and education of our children, and it's not clear cut. There are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of variables that we're having to weigh in making these decisions. But thought you guys all were owed an explanation of where I'm coming from when I'm making my decisions. Other than that, thank you all, and welcome to our new staff members, our new administrators, and we're excited with all the progress we've made over the last several years, and more recently over the last couple years, looking to bringing a lot of the committees to the steering committee of the strategic plan and building a better Bethel Park. So, thank you.
You were going to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to just state that, this board has made a lot of decisions here lately outside of COVID that has strived to meet some of the goals for us who got elected here a few years ago of improving the educational experience within the students of Bethel Park. And you see that here tonight. There were some hirings here tonight. There's been some hirings in the last few months that our goal is to improve and increase the educational experience that our students are getting through all grade levels. And it's just not ending here tonight. There'll be hopefully more changes coming, more opportunities to improve on that educational status that we once had held and continue to strive to go for again. But I just want, hopefully, everyone in the community, we got tied on so many side issues here in regards to COVID that we lost track that a lot of us got into this to improve that educational experience that the children here in Bethel Park demanded, had been lacking for a few years, and our goal was to improve that and increase that and as we keep moving forward. Thank you.
And just to add on to that, I think it's worth thanking everybody who's been a part of the strategic planning committees, and this one in particular is the curriculum committee. I think that with all the input that we received from people sharing stories, looking at data, results, it became apparent that we need to maintain, we need to even need to improve our focus on maintaining consistency throughout the grade level journey of students and then across classrooms to maintain greater consistency. And that's the hire, especially with Mandy tonight, is a even greater focus on making sure that we have that consistency, that we're driving more or less the discipline and the curriculum structure across grades, across classrooms. And so this is a result of what we're doing. It's an early result of what's already happening within these strategic planning committees. And over the course of the next 4 to 5 months, I think everybody across the community is going to see some excellent recommendations to help move Bethel Park forward.
Anybody else?
I need to echo what everybody said here tonight. You know, the one thing as a Bethel Park graduate, academics is first. That's that was the building block that, you know, when I graduated in the 90s. And I'm looking at my child who is a rising senior in 3 weeks. Unbelievable that that's happening. That I want her, that education for her. I also have a rising second grader. I want that education for him. The consistency across buildings is something that this board has talked about. The consistency that we can have at K to 12 now and work with those facilitators is going to be even greater to keep the consistency going. So thank you, and I hope we didn't totally kill your Florida vacation.
I'd like to thank Mr. Cromie for your presentation. I'm glad to hear that we're going to have the email. As someone who doesn't do a lot of social media, I'm glad we're going to have the email again, recognition. I did want to point out that unofficially in 1971, at the YMCA down on McMurray Road, or McLaughlin Run Road, I was part of the first Powder Puff game, but it was sort of an unofficial kind of game, and then it moved into the school system, so.
Did you win?
I don't think we did. We were seniors and we lost to the juniors, but still, it was fun. It was one of, but I continued. I coached it after I became a teacher in Bethel for years, down at Perky Field. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Cromie, for that, and hopefully it'll become a regular part of our meetings again. I want to echo about the strategic plan. Most of the committees are finishing up their initial work in the next couple weeks and are getting ready to present to the steering committee at the end of August. And so we're moving forward with that, and it's a very exciting time for all of us who want to envision a 5-year future and what's going to be occurring in the district in the next 5 years. And I think there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around the new staff that we're having and the staff that is still here, and everybody working together under the wonderful leadership of Dr. Walsh, our new superintendent. And just a brief explanation of my vote on this safety plan. I'm very uncomfortable with us not having masks. I think we should mask. I believe that we are our brother's keepers. And that masking is not a big deal, but I'm looking forward to meeting again before school starts. So, and motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Nagel, seconded by Mr.
Second.
Modrak.
Voting is open. Motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.